Good morning, everybody. We have a new chapter of Farmer Boy to read today called Breaking the Calves. This is chapter 9 in your book. So in Black Beauty, we heard that breaking a horse meant training them to have a rider. So that meant, wearing a saddle and getting used to being harnessed with another horse and to not a sleigh, I'm thinking of the ones in Farmer Boy, but being able to have a cart behind them that they pull. So what do you think it means to break a calf? Do you have any idea of what maybe the calves are used for in the farm? Okay, we'll find out today. We do know already that there is a yoke that Almanzo was given for his birthday. Now this joins two calves together. So we'll find out a little bit more about that in today's chapter. So Farmer Boy chapter 9, Breaking the Calves. Almanzo had been so busy filling the ice house that he had no time to give the calves another lesson. So he hasn't done that at all since since his birthday when he was using the yoke for the calves. So on Monday morning he said, "Father, I can't go to school today, can I? If I don't work those calves, they will forget how to act." You think he really needs to do this for the calves, or is he wanting to just get out of school? Maybe a little of both. Now, Father tugged his beard and twinkled his eyes. "Seems as though a boy might forget his lesson too," he said. A good point. If Almanzo goes any longer without going to school, he's going to forget everything he learned. Almanzo had not thought of that. He thought a minute and said, "Well, I have had more lessons than the calves, and besides, they're younger than I be." Father looked solemn, but his beard had a smile under it, and Mother exclaimed, "Oh, let the boy stay home if he wants. Won't hurt him for once in a way, and he's right. The calves do need breaking." This probably sounds very strange to you because it's crazy to have a kid skip school for so many times. He was doing that for his birthday and filling the ice house. Actually, I think that was a weekend, but then just to break the calves. However, keep in mind, in these times, it's possible that his full-time job would eventually be just working on the farm. So if that's the case, these are really practical skills, although his parents also want him to have school lessons and actually go to school to be able to read and do a lot of basic math that probably would be used in the farming jobs that he would have later on. So Almanzo is going to stay home from school. He went to the barn and called the little calves out into the frosty air. He fitted the little yoke over their necks, and he held up the bows and then put the bow pins in it. And he tied a rope around Star's small little nubs of horn. He did this all by himself, all of the things putting the calves together. It's quite a bit for an 8-year-old boy, or I think he just turned 9. Now, all that morning, he backed little by little around the barnyard, shouting, "Get up!" Do you know what that makes them do? Go forward. That's right. And he used the carrot to help them learn that. And then he would say, what to stop them? Whoa! That's right. So can you show me get up? Get up! Moving forward, and whoa! Stop. And he licked, and they licked up the pieces of carrots from his woolly mittens. Now and then, he ate a piece of raw carrot himself. The outside part he thinks is best. It comes off in a thick, solid ring, and it is very sweet. The inside part is juicier and clear like yellow ice, but it has a thin, sharp taste. At noon, Father said the calves had been worked enough for one day, and that afternoon he would show Almanzo how to make a whip. They went into the woods, and Father cut some moose wood boughs. Almanzo carried them up to Father's workroom over the woodshed, and Father showed him how to peel off the bark in strips. Have any of you seen wood that just peels right off before? Specific trees have different types of bark, and some are just long and slender, and they do kind of peel off like string cheese or something. So, and then he showed him how to braid a whip lash. So this whip lash is truly braided pieces of wood. First, he tied the ends of 5 strips together, and then he braided them in a round, solid braid. All that afternoon, he sat beside Father's bench. Father shaved shingles, remember hearing about that? And Almanzo carefully braided his whip, just as Father braided the big black snake whips of leather. While he turned and twisted the strips, the thin outer bark fell off in flakes, leaving the soft white inside bark. The whip would have been white, except that Almanzo's hands left a few smudges. He could not finish it before chore time, and the next day he had to go to school. But he braided his whip every evening by the heater, till the lash was 5 feet long, longer than he is. So he's been working on this a little bit every evening after he comes back from school and helps with his chores. So then Father lent him his little jackknife, and Almanzo whittled a wooden handle. He gets a piece of wood and whittles it down to be just right, and bound the lash to it with strips of moosewood bark, wrapped around that wood handle, connecting the whip to the handle. Now the whip was done. It would be a perfectly good whip until it dried brittle in the hot summer. So trees get really dry and brittle, and so this whip would too because it's made of bark. Almanzo could crack the whip almost as loudly as Father cracked a black snake whip. And he did not finish it a minute too soon, for already he needed it to give the calves their next lesson. As we saw with Black Beauty, whips could be used, sadly, to hurt horses. However, sometimes the whips were used just to have the sound so that the horse knew what to do. And we'll see if that's the case for the calves. Now he had to teach them to turn to the left when he shouted, "Ha!" That looks like actually you're right. So there's left for you. So when he shouted, "Ha!" and then to the right when he shouted, "Gee." As soon as the whip was ready, he began. Every Saturday morning, he spent in the barnyard teaching Star and Bright. He never whipped them. He only cracked the whip. There we go. So he doesn't actually hit the calves with the whip. It's just the sound that they hear to go, he, or no, I got it mixed up. Ha is left, and then gee is right. Now, he knew you could never teach an animal anything if you struck it or even shouted at it angrily. You must always be gentle and quiet and patient, even when the animals make mistakes. That's so, so good. He knows that he has to be very gentle with them when they make a mistake and not shout at them or hit them. Star and Bright must like him and trust him and know he would never hurt them. For if they were once afraid of him, they would never be good, willing, hardworking oxen. So that's actually very good for him to learn this just in general, because we should treat animals with kindness and respect. But he also is doing it because it's actually good to have oxen who are going to do the right thing, and they will only do that if they really respect Almanzo. Now they always obeyed him when he shouted, "Get up!" and "Whoa!" So he did not stand in front of them any longer. He stood at Star's left side. Star was next to him, so Star was the nigh ox. Nigh ox means the one right next to him. Bright was on the other side of Star, so Bright was the off ox. So we've got the nigh ox right next to him, and then the off ox. Almanzo shouted, "Gee!" and cracked the whip with all his might, close beside Star's head, not to hit Star, but so that Star knew what direction. Star dodged to get away from it, and that turned both calves to the right. Then Almanzo said, "Get up," and let them walk a little way quietly. So cracking the whip right here makes them want to go away from it. So that's the point of the whip. That tells them which direction. Then he made the whiplash curl in the air and crack loudly on the other side of Bright. And with the crack, he yelled, "Ha!" So he's putting it to the right of them, right here, making them turn to the left, going, "Ha!" Bright swerved away from the whip, and that turned both calves to the left. Now Bright, sometimes they jumped and started to run. Then Almanzo said, "Whoa," in a deep, solemn voice like father's. And if they didn't stop, he ran after them and headed them off. When that happened, he had to make them practice "get up" and "whoa" again for a long time. He had to be very patient with them. Now, one very cold Saturday morning, when the calves were feeling frisky, they ran, meaning like they were kind of antsy, wanting to move. They ran away the first time he cracked the whip. They kicked up their heels and ran, bawling around the barnyard. When he tried to stop them, they ran right over him, tumbling him into the snow. They kept right on running because they liked to run. He could hardly do anything with them that morning, so they were just in a mood to play. And he was so mad that he shook all over, and tears started to run down his cheeks. He wanted to yell at those mean calves and kick them and hit them over the head with the butt of his whip. Why is he angry? Because they won't do what he is asking them to do. But why are they doing this? They're just young calves. They are playing around and they still make some mistakes and don't necessarily want to work always. But he chose not to. He's being patient. He put up the whip and he tied the rope again to Star's horns. And he made them go twice around the barnyard, starting when he said, "Get up," and stopping when he said, "Whoa." Afterward, he told Father about it, because he thought anyone who was as patient as that with calves was patient enough to be allowed to at least currycomb the colts. Remember, he loves these calves, but he really wants to train the colts. But Father didn't seem to think that. All he said was, "That's right, son. Slow and patient does it. Keep on that way and you'll have a good yoke of oxen yet." Now, the very next Saturday, Star and Bright obeyed him perfectly. He did not need to crack the whip because they obeyed his shout. But he cracked it anyway. He liked to. That Saturday, the French boys, Pierre and Louis, came to see Almanzo. Pierre's father was Lazy John, you might have guessed it, one of the Frenchmen. And Louis's father was French Joe. They lived with many brothers and sisters in the little houses in the woods, and went fishing and hunting and berrying. They never had to go to school, but often they came to work or play with Almanzo. They watched while Almanzo showed off his calves in the barnyard. Star and Bright were behaving so well that Almanzo had a splendid idea. He brought out his beautiful birthday hand sled, and with an auger, which pokes holes in things, it's like this little knife that has a rounded edge so it can poke a hole in it. He bored a hole through the crosspiece between the runners in front. So he's got his little sled and he's poking a hole. Then he took one of Father's chains and a linchpin from Father's big bobsled, and he hitched up the calves. So he's got his little sled, there's a hole in it so that the chain can go through, and the oxen, the calves, would be basically dragging this sled behind them. Now there's a little iron ring underneath their yoke in the middle, just like the rings in big yokes. Almanzo stuck the handle of his sled through this ring, as far as the handle's little crosspiece. The crosspiece kept it from going too far through the ring. Then he fastened one end of the chain to the ring, and the other end he wound around the linchpin in the hole in the crossbar and fastened it. When Star and Bright pulled, they would pull the sled by the chain. When they stopped, the sled's stiff handle would stop the sled. So it's easy enough to pull, but it was smart of him to figure out how to stop it so that when the calves stopped, that stiff handle would go here so that the chain wouldn't just have them keep going. "Now, Louis, you get on the sled," Almanzo said. "No, I'm biggest," Pierre said, pushing Louis back. "I get first ride." "You better not," said Almanzo. "When the calves feel the heft, they're liable to run away," meaning when they feel his weight. "Let Louis go first because he's lighter." "No, I don't want to," Louis said. "I guess you better," Almanzo told him. "No," said Louis. "Be you scared?" Almanzo asked. Yes, he's scared, Pierre said. I am not scared, Louis said. I just don't want to. He's scared, Pierre sneered. Yes, he's scared. Louis said he was not either scared. You are too scaredy cat, Almanzo and Pierre said together. They said he was a fraidy cat. They said he was a baby. Pierre told him to go back to his mama. So finally, Louis sat carefully on the sled. Almanzo cracked his whip and shouted, "Get up!" Star and Bright started and stopped. They tried to turn around to see what was behind them, but Almanzo sternly said, "Get up," again. And this time they started and kept on going. Almanzo walked beside them, cracking his whip and shouting, "Gee," and he drove them clear around the barnyard. Pierre ran after the sled and got on too. And still the calves behaved perfectly. So Almanzo opened the barnyard gate. Pierre and Louis quickly got off the sled, and Pierre said, "They're going to run away." Almanzo said, "I guess I know how to handle my own calves." He's feeling pretty confident. He's thinking, we can open up the gate, take them out. I am so good with these calves, don't you worry. Now he went back to his place beside Star. He cracked his whip and shouted, "Get up!" And he drove Star and Bright straight out of the safe barnyard into the big, wide, glittering world outside. Now, what's the risk of leaving the barnyard with the fence around it? Well, if something goes wrong, if the calves start running, and we know they like to run, then it's going to be difficult to stop them. And if, Almanzo falls off the sled or whatever to let them keep running, maybe he can't ever get them back. They could get into a road. There's all these things that the calves aren't used to. Now, he shouted "ha" and he shouted "gee," and he drove them past the house. He drove them out to the road. They stopped when he shouted "whoa." So far, everything's working well. Pierre and Louis were excited now. They piled onto the sled, but Almanzo made them slide back. He was going to ride too. Now Almanzo sat in front. Pierre held on to him, and Louis held on to Pierre. Their legs stuck out, and they held them stiffly up outside, up above the snow. You don't ever want to drag your feet in that kind of situation. Almanzo proudly cracked his whip and shouted, "Get up!" Up went Star's tail, up went Bright's tail, up went their heels. The sled bounced into the air, and then everything happened all at once. "Bah!" said Star. "Bah!" said Bright. Right in Almanzo's face were flying hoofs and swishing tails, and close overhead were galumping hindquarters. "Whoa!" yelled Almanzo. "Whoa! Look at that!" Their heels kicking up, their tails up. They are angry or scared. "Bah!" said Bright. "Bah!" said Star. It was far swifter than sliding downhill. Trees and snow and calves' hind legs were all mixed up. Every time the sled came down, Almanzo's teeth crashed together. So he's still on the sled, and he's trying to hold on, but it's so fast. Bright was running faster than Star. Uh-oh, they're yoked together, so one is starting to run faster. They were starting to go off the road. The sled was turning over. Almanzo yelled, "Ha, ha, ha," trying to get them back on course. Or it's to the left when they do ha. He went headlong into deep snow, yelling, "Ha." His open mouth was full of snow. He spit it out and wallowed and scrambled up. Everything was still. The road was empty. The calves were gone. The sled was gone. Pierre and Louis were coming up out of the snow. Louis was swearing in French, but Almanzo paid no attention to him. Pierre sputtered and wiped the snow from his face and said, "Sacre bleu! I think you say you drive your calves. They not run away, eh?" Far down the road, almost buried in the deep drifts by the mound of snow over the stone fence, Almanzo saw the calves' red backs. "They did not run away," he said to Pierre. "They only ran. There they be." He went down to look at them. Their heads and their backs were above the snow. The yoke was crooked and their necks were askew in the bows. Their noses were together, and their eyes were large and wondering. They seemed to be asking each other, what happened? They're so confused. Now Pierre and Louis helped dig the snow away from them and the sled. Almanzo straightened the yoke and the chain. Then he stood in front of them and said, get up. While Pierre and Louis pushed them from behind. These are just little calves, and they are in the snow, not sure what to do. The calves climbed into the road, and Almanzo headed them toward the barn. They went willingly. Almanzo walked beside Star, cracking his whip and shouting, and everything he told them to do, they did. Pierre and Louis walked behind. They would not ride. Almanzo put the calves in their stall and gave them each a little nevin of corn. He wiped the yoke carefully and hung it up. He put the whip on its nail, and he wiped the chain and the linchpin and put them where Father had left them. Then he told Pierre and Louis that they could sit behind him, and they slid downhill on the sled till chore time. That night, Father asked him, you have some trouble this afternoon, son? You think he knows? No, Almanzo said, I just found out I have to break Star and Bright to drive when I ride. So he did that in the barnyard. So he learned a really good, valuable lesson. He can't expect them to be ready to just do everything he thinks of. He's got to train them for it first, but he didn't give up. He is now going to break them or train them to be able to have a little sled behind him. And I think he'll be successful. He's been doing so well. Okay, a couple of questions before we go. Now, why does Almanzo not whip Star and Bright, even when they are disobeying? He has to be very gentle with them and patient. They will never respect him if he doesn't show kindness and respect to them. Now, why does Almanzo say, I guess I know how to handle my own calves? Why did he say that to Pierre and Louis? He was feeling really confident. He felt like, oh, these are my calves. I can do whatever with them. When we realized he wasn't ready. And he had a splendid idea. What was his splendid idea? Have the calves drag the sled with the boys on it behind him. So, do you think he knows really how to handle his calves? Not completely. He's good with them, but he was feeling too proud of himself, too confident, and this was a good lesson in humility for him. Okay, well, that's all for today's reading. I hope you are enjoying it, and I will talk to you soon. Have a wonderful day. Bye.